Alright, what's up guys? New video today. Today I'm updating, actually of all things, Gravekeepers. Now, I just recently did this video not too long ago, but actually a subscriber by the name of Luke recommended a Dark Magician Gravekeeper deck for me to try out, and I kind of started testing with it, and I almost couldn't believe how good it was. It's really, really consistent. Just because of a somewhat newish card called Magician's Soul. You may have heard of it. It's sweeping the meta. This card is incredibly good. If you have a spawn trap card based deck, it's basically like you have a trade-in for all your cards, because you could just discard any of your extra copies, any dead spell or trap cards, and then draw free cards. It's kind of insane. On top of that, because all of the Gravekeepers are spellcasters, you can actually go into, let me show you in a second here, you can actually go into the Dark Magician boss monster if you play the right cards. And this has even more draw power for you. It has an ignition effect that you activate whenever a spell or trap card is activated, which you will do because this is a spell and trap card based deck. It's just, it kind of all feeds itself. But yeah, it's a very impressive deck. I'm almost surprised at how good the two decks blended together. But let's get started with this deck profile. We play 3 copies of Magician's Soul. Magician Souls. Now, what this card basically does is it sends a level 5 or higher spellcaster monster to the graveyard for cost, so that effect can't be negated. And then you can either special summon this or special summon a Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your graveyard. Now, I do play 2 copies of Dark Magician, but you don't have to play 2 copies of Dark Magician. You can actually cut the whole Dark Magician engine out completely and just play the level 5 or higher what are they called? Gravekeeper monsters, if you wanted to. Like, for example, the one that stops graveyard effects, you could play that if you wanted to. And you could just special summon this and send that to the graveyard for free. But its second effect, or I guess, in text-wise, its first effect is even crazier, which is that you can send spell and trap cards from your hand, from either your hand or your field, to the graveyard in order to draw that many cards. Which is crazy, and it's up to 2. So it's up to 2. You can either do 1 or 2, but you can't do more. But yeah, that effect is crazy for this deck, because oftentimes you will actually get more Necrovalleys than you can actually do anything with. Like, there's scenarios there, of course, you really want a Necrovalley, you really want to draw it, or you really want to search it. But there are scenarios where you have too many Necrovalleys, and you have sort of dead Necrovalleys in the hand, but they're not doing anything, and you can actually just trade them away for free draws. That effect is just crazy. Then we play 2 copies of Dark Magician just in case we draw 1. But basically, this card, and you can see here this is an older printing, newer printings, darker, lighter. But basically what this card does in the deck is that it's a free summon, and once you have it on board, you can basically go into the main guy, which is the Dark Magician's fusion monster. But other than that, it's actually, it's pretty big. It's 2,500. When you have already a lot of annoying things on the field, such as the Necrovalley, it's even tougher to get rid of. But you have to be careful with this, because you can't bring this back from the graveyard off of Magician's Soul if you have Necrovalley on the field. You just got to be careful with when you activate which effects, more or less. You just have to make sure that Necrovalley is the final card that you activate. Then we've got 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Headman. This basically, when you normal summon it, lets you target a level 4, exactly a level 4 Gravekeeper monster, and then special summon it from the graveyard. Of course, yes, it does ignore Necrovalley's effect, and that works on normal or special summon, which makes the card pretty busted. Then we got 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Command. Basically, when you discard this, it lets you search a Necrovalley. But what's amazing about this card is it actually works very well with Headman, because you can draw this. You can basically draw this, discard again Necrovalley, summon Headman, and then summon this back right, like, immediately. It's really good. Then we play 3 copies of Gravekeeper Gravekeeper Spiritualist. This card is like a material and a polymerization built in one. Basically, during your main phase 1, you can use this as material along with a card on the field or in your hand in order to summon a Gravekeeper, what is it called? A Gravekeeper fusion monster, basically. Or not even that, you can actually use this to special summon. If Necrovalley's on the field, you can use this monster to fusion summon a spellcaster fusion monster from your extra deck. using this card and a card either on the field or in your hand. So actually you can use Gravekeeper Spiritualist in order to make the Dark Magicians. If you have Dark Magicians in hand and you have this on field, you know, you didn't brick, it's okay. You can just use Spiritualist to summon the Dark Magicians, which is pretty cool. So there's multiple routes to do it. But yeah, Spiritual is definitely a 3 of. It'll let you go into multiple fusion monsters. And that's what's awesome too. It's Master Rule 5. So you can summon like 2-3 fusion monsters, and you don't have to worry about making the appropriate link zones. Then we've got 2 copies of Recruiter. I opted for 2. You know, I replaced one more. I replaced the last one with a part of a spellbook engine. But yeah, he's actually really good too with it. If you use him as fusion material, you get to search every single time for a level 15 or 1500 or lower defense. What is it called? Gravekeeper monster. So he can come in handy when you fusion summon him away. He's definitely good for that. Next we play 1 copy of Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. This guy is basically, it starts up your spellbook engine, but you play less of him than the spellbooks, because the spellbooks, if they're dead in your hand, you can actually get rid of them very easily, just because you have the Magician Souls. But other than that, I think he's still fairly good. Those are the monsters. Next, we have the spells. We play 2 copies of Spellbook Magician of Secrets. This basically searches the Spellbook Magician of Prophecy or Spellbook Magician of Knowledge. And this card, you can either send a Spellbook card from your hand or field to the graveyard to draw 2 cards, or you can send a face-up spellcaster on your side of the field to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. So either way, you're drawing 2 cards. Both effects are good. That second effect is actually really good with the one where you send a spellcaster from field is good with Recruiter, because Recruiter doesn't actually miss timing. He has a mandatory effect when he leaves the field. But yeah, it's very good in this deck. And fortunately, not only is this engine already fairly consistent, you actually have, let me show you, an extra deck monster called Crowley. And all it requires is 2 spellcasters, but that monster actually lets you search the spellbook engine on summon. So you just get like free, basically you get free resources. Then we play 1 copy of Mechanized Fusion. This is one of our first fusion spells. You can banish materials from the field or from the graveyard. Now you have to be careful again, because remember, you can't banish from the graveyard with Necrovally in the field, so you have to really understand when you activate this stuff. But you can banish from the graveyard or field or graveyard spellcasters to summon a spellcaster monster from your extra deck, and that will typically be the Dark Magicians, Gravekeeper Spiritualist, or you can actually go into the crazy thing, which is the Quintet Magician. Any of them are really good. And then we've got the other fusion spell, which is Ultra Polymerization. This card is insane too. You basically pay 2,000 life points. Your opponent can't respond to your fusion summon. And you summon a monster using monsters as material on the field, which you have plenty of. And then on top of that, you can actually bring them back. You can target the fusion material. You can target the fusion monster and then bring the materials back, and then their effects are negated, but you basically get a free monster and your monsters that you used for material right back onto the field, and then you can link them away into something like Predaplant, Verde Anaconda, and then you can just fusion summon again, and you can get all the fusion monsters you want. It's kind of busted. Then we have, for the rest of our spells, 3 copies of Necrovally. I didn't space them out last time. 3 copies of Necrovally. This card is just so good in the meta right now. Like it really is crazy in the meta. It destroys Eldritch, like it really does, because all of their secondary effects to banish and then get more resources are completely shut off. So if you just play through their first line, like none of their effect, they can't like do any of their recovery effects at all, which is kind of crazy. And then on top of it, it's good against Adamancipators, it's good against Salamangrates. It's just good against so many decks right now. Remember, Gravekeepers are as strong as Necrovally is against the meta. And Necrovally is very good against the meta right now. And don't forget, too, it stops. A lot of people are playing DD Crow as their hand trap. If this is on the field, DD Crow does nothing. Also, like, for example, they're playing DD Crow. Call by the Grave is another card that does nothing under Necrovally. So Necrovally right now is very, very, very good. Then we play 3 copies of Necrovally Throne. Necrovally Throne is basically, it searches any Gravekeeper monster in your deck, already a great effect, or if you don't need to search another Gravekeeper monster, you can actually use its secondary effect, which is to use the, what is it called? You can use the secondary effect to basically get an extra normal summon of a Gravekeeper monster, which is very useful too. Then we've got 3 copies of Royal Tribute. Royal Tribute is a card that came off 2 Banlists ago. Basically, if your opponent, if you control Necrovally, both players have to discard all of the monsters in their hands. This card is super sick because you will most likely spam out all your monsters onto the board anyway. So by the time you activate it, you just toss your opponent's monsters, then you activate Necrovally, and everything's locked in there. They can't get it out. It's great. Then we play 2 copies of Super Polymerization, which will basically fuse away your opponent's board, or you can sometimes use it for your own fusions. You have a fusion-based deck. Then we play 1 Imperial Tomb of Necrovally. It's searchable off a Spiritualist. This is when you're closing out the game. You kind of just search that out and wrap it up. Then we've got 2 Solemn Judgments. Again, same situation. Old printing, new printing. Then 2 Solemn Judgments and 3 Infinite Impermanents. And the great thing, again, like I said, if you don't like any of those traps, you can, or they're dead in your hand, you can always you can always get rid of them with the Magician's Souls. Alright, so for the extra deck, we play 2 copies of Spiritualist. He's like your main boss monsters on the Gravekeeper side. He basically allows you to, whenever he protects Necrovally, he protects himself when Necrovally's on the field. His attack is based on, sort of the materials that you used. But overall, this card's like really good for the deck. It gives you protection, and then it searches. It's a weird search effect where you have to activate it during the main phase, but then you actually get to resolve the search at the end phase. So it's a good search, but at the same time, sometimes you search spell and trap cards and you can't activate them. Sometimes it's like sometimes you search and you want to use the card, but you get it at the end phase, so you don't get the. It's a little weird, but it's still very good. Then we play 2 copies of the Dark Magicians. This card basically has an ignition effect whenever a spell and trap card is activated, either during your turn or during your opponent's. And because you're playing a lot of spells and traps and stuff like that, basically it allows you to draw a card. And if it's a quick play or a trap, you can activate it immediately. If it's a normal spell, I think you can just set it. Normal spell or trap, you can just set it. So either way, it's a really, really good effect, and you can use it during both players' turn. And even if you draw a monster, it's basically just a free monster. So it just continuously gives you free draws during your turn and during your opponent's turn. Next, we've got Quintet Magician. This is like one of your boss monsters. All it requires is 5 spellcaster monsters, and on top of that, if you use spellcasters with different names, like it can't be destroyed, it can't be targeted, it can't be tributed. Like, this card's crazy. It really is, and it destroys all. No, if it's summoned off of the if it's summoned off of 5 different monster names, you can just blow up your opponent's board, which is just mania. Then we've got our Super Poly targets, which is 1 Diplex or Chimera, Salamangreats. I don't like them, and this basically, what I love is you summon this against use this against Salamangreats, and then you can tribute this monster, get it off your field if you want to, and then they can't activate spell and trap cards during the battle phase. Then we've got 1 against zombies, Nether Soul Dragon, 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, which you can actually use for yourself, 1 Predaplant ×3, which is 3 dark monsters, 1 Tornado Dragon. Sometimes you go into the rank 4s, quick rank 4s. You need to get rid of stuff. 1 Crowley. Crowley allows you, like I said, on summon to search the spellbook engine. It doesn't really search. It's a weird situation where it actually reveals them, and then your opponent chooses one of them at random. So the great thing about the spellbook engine, no matter what part they pick, you're still going to go through the entire spellbook engine. That's why they call it an engine. Then we've got its second effect, which will let you summon a level 5 or higher spellcaster monster without tributing. Then we've got the Wee Witch, basically 2 darks, and it's a spellcaster, Predaplant Verde Anaconda, which is, this basically allows you to fusion summon without you having to have the fusion spell in your hand, you just at the cost of 2,000 life points. Also, it can change something to dark, which helps with Super Poly and Starving Venom. And then it's the only thing is after that you can't summon anymore. Then we've got Cross Sheep. This basically, whenever you fusion summon, you can target a level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard and special summon it. You just got to be careful, don't use that under the Necrovally. And then we've got the Boral Sword Dragon, just in case we need to OTK. But overall, I'm very happy with this deck. This deck is it's pretty wild. I'm surprised at how well it has been performing. But thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe.